You didn't go to jail yet for your taxes, right?
Not yet.
Oh, Scott, I'm going to real soon. I don't Are you going to help me or what?
Yeah. We have space.
You're all going to jail?
Yeah, she's going to
We
jail.
have taxes to pay.
Yeah. I'm sending her to jail.
Oh.
Let's jump right into
Okay.
this. And I think one thing I think a lot of people would like to know about is this whole new band you've put together. I mean, I hear the record. This is a crackerjack band.
Sure. The band, well, I had to get a permit to actually be seen with them because they're so young. You know, it looked like some kind of indecent act was going to be transpired. Maybe it even has already, and I don't know what it's called. They're young guys. Phil Johnson, the keyboard player, is very old. He's nearly 30. And he comes from that kind of British, eccentric, post-punk, angry young man department. A bit like... in fact, he's got a kind of sense of humour like Mac from the Bunnymen. He's a very sharp, ambitious guy with quite a sense of humour and irony about himself. He's also very enthusiastic, and he's been a great boon to me because he gave me back the baby, baby, push, push part of Robert Plant that had gone away. I'd kind of put it in a corner somewhere and said I didn't know very much about it anymore. He told me that most songs that were being played today were really Kashmir, fast or slow. And judging by what I'm hearing on American radio, at least 2 bands are doing Kashmir, fast or slow all the time. He gave me back parts of my sense of humour, and he also opened the door to me finding probably the best young musicians in Britain, personally speaking. Chris Blackwell, the drummer, is another young guy who's a multi-instrumental player. He plays keyboard, sings, plays guitar. He sings better than I do, and he goes out with a real foxy lady from a group in Britain called Bucks Fizz, who in fact probably like Lawrence Welk's granddaughters all get a job in the music business. He operates 2 or 3 computers from pads around his kind of drum cage. So we've got all sorts of samples. We can bring in the Zeppelin samples, bring in the girl vocals. We can stand there and take the piss out of the whole thing without even moving. I finally reached the point where I don't even have to move anymore. And he introduced Doug Boyle, the guitarist, who was kind of into the Alan Holdsworth, post-John McLaughlin jazz fusion stuff, which to me is a kind of very affected area of music. It's either great or it just doesn't happen at all. There's no middle ground, you know. So we got Doug to, we suggested to Doug that he might actually leave the hovel in which he now abides, and he could probably have a life forever in a 1-bedroom apartment if he lowered his guitar strap 2 notches. And so he did. And he's learning very, very quickly that being a virgin isn't that much fun. He's really rocking now. And Phil Scragg, who played on the album, the bass player, couldn't work with us live, so we got this guy called Charlie Jones from a band in England called Violent Blue. Very good band, who were produced by Tim Palmer, the guy who's worked with me a lot. Tim worked with Violent Blue after my Shaken and Stirred album, and then Tim went on to do the Screaming Blue Messiahs and the Mighty Lemon Drops, and then came back to me again. He's now in LA for his trials, sitting in some motel somewhere, wishing that he could enjoy the #1 most added spot with me. So they're a great bunch, and the whole kind of team is geared to this excitement factor. After all the years of denial, fortunately, only musically and not any other way, we're back and stomping instead of taking too many kind of odd angular moves. It's a much more direct approach, and it's a much happier atmosphere to be in.
I noticed it lyrically too, because in the album I think where you're alluding to where Phil, I guess, pushed you or basically lit that fire under you to go back to perhaps type of imagery, the type of visions that you were doing 15 years ago, but updated to where you were today.
I think lyrically there are similarities between that and perhaps the Zeppelin, parts of the Zeppelin time. Like Physical Graffiti, there was a track called Sick Again, which starts from a window of a rented limousine. I saw your pretty blue eyes. One day soon you're going to reach 16, painted lady in the city of lies. And it was all the old groupies around the Hyatt House in LA. Such decadence. I only watched from the side. But a cynical. How can a guy talk like this? It's disgusting. Anyway, I will, and I am, so here I go. So things like Tall Cool One on the new album have got a kind of sense of humour in there, and a kind of knock at the door to all that kind of voyeurism, if you like. Somebody said I make a great voyeur. Perhaps it's my age. And really, I see it like some kind of Harry Dean Stanton scenario in some kind of post-Paris, Texas movie type of thing. Things like Tall Cool One and Billy's Revenge, psychobilly type of thing. You got some kind of place late on a Friday night, a truck stop, and you pull in for gasoline and you look out of the window and you look across and you see this scenario, this Friday night dance, where everybody's inside and nobody can get out, and everybody's getting more steamed up. There's only 3 women and 100 men or something like that. And you know, you start painting all these pictures and you write silly songs.
Yeah, what about the whole video that you've done for Heaven Knows? I mean, you did it in Morocco, and there's certainly a lot of history that exists there. And what do you feel you were trying to capture, or resulted in capturing?
Well, with the video and with the album cover and with the title of the album, Now Zen, there's a kind of, it's just a sense of humour, a flippance, if you like, looking back at all the kind of seriousness and symbology that surrounded Zeppelin, and in a way still does. And it's kind of knocking humorously at the whole kind of awareness and the kind of projection that Zeppelin had by doing nothing at all. So making that video there, I made the video, I mean, it's 3.5 hours by plane to get from London to Marrakesh. And it's just another world completely. And then if you drive for another 8 hours, you are in paradise. So it's like going to Atlanta, but it's different, you know. And we filmed it very close to where I wrote the lyrics to Kashmir, and where I wrote the lyrics to Achilles' Last Stand in Zeppelin. And really, I think the whole kind of wah of all this sort of thing, and the symbols running down the side of the album cover, it's kind of good fun, but it also, it's evocative. It gives me the mood and the spirit that got me going in the first place. But mainly it's good fun.
Good. Let's turn you into critic now. You stand aside from the album, turn into a critic, and if you were reviewing your own album, what would you say about it?
Golly, if I was reviewing it, well, if I was English, I'd say, should he be doing this at this point in his career? You know, perhaps Foreigner could do with 2 singers, or something, or perhaps it could be the Unrighteous Brothers, or perhaps he could do a duet with Richard Cole or Bette Midler or something. But as I'm not an Englishman particularly, I'd say it looks like he's found his spirit again, and it's amongst everything else that's around, because he has such an ego to satisfy. He's done all right, just about.
In fact, going back, you think you've done more than all right. But going back, I read that...
Yeah, but I have to live with me. I don't know. It's not... My opinion is not the same as yours. I've got to know within myself, am I doing okay? I don't know whether I am. I hear a lot of great music around. Some of it I'm very envious of.
In fact, getting off, I was going to talk about it, getting on that track. Why do you think there's so much great music out there? Most of it is in the college radio or alternative realm, and the mainstream, the commercial stations, just want nothing to do with it. They just want to play the same, you know, like homogenized milk over and over.
Yeah, well, I've been very lucky as far as the mainstream AOR radio goes. I haven't really had any hits, but they still play me. And really, when Zeppelin arrived in the States all those years ago, college radio really was what it was all about. FM radio, stereo radio was that, and that was it. You could hear Puccini, you could hear Grand Funk Railroad, and you could hear Firesign Theatre, you could hear all manner of things on the same program, and that was right across America. But with the corporate sort of mentality striking right in there, and sponsors being courted by the creating, it's kind of it's a kind of never-ending circle, chicken and egg. What came first? Did the kids really want to hear Pink Floyd forever? You know, or was it the guys who pay for the Coca-Cola ads who wanted to make sure that the kids would tune in? So you get this terrible vicious circle. So that imagination and ingenuity and new stuff can't really get its nose in there, because maybe they think that the listener's going to switch channels so as he can hear even more Whitesnake, you know? So it's a vicious circle, and college radio to me kind of represents something that is still, the motives are still the right ones. I mean, I haven't heard a great deal, but I carry my own little radio, and while I sit in my garret on the 21st floor overlooking Central Park, tough life, I tune into 91.1 in New York, you know, and I hear some very funny music and some great stuff. But it's hard, really, because I know that a lot of the guys who are actually involved in AOR radio, in the big stations, I remember them 20 years ago, and they really were the right guys, and they really still are, but they're caught in a kind of, some kind of elusive trap, which really they've settled down into, you know. I mean, once you leave college, once you get on, you get a car, you fall in love, maybe that one night in the back seat at the drive-in, and you've got to do something about it, like get a job.
And pay a mortgage.
And pay a mortgage. And you're off. You're in there. You're locked in. What are you going to do? It's easy for me to stand here philosophizing at 39 years old and say, yeah, but that's no good. But you still got to look after yourself. And you've got to look after your own. And maybe if you play heart 10 times a day, you're going to get paid a little more than if you play the DBs all night or something like that, you know, or Husker Du. It's a peculiar one, and from my angle, I'd like to see... In fact, there is a lot more awareness, really. I mean, everybody knows what the traps are, including myself. However, I talk like this, but I'd like a hit, and that depends on support from that kind of mass coverage of radio. So, I'm a whore, really.
Let me ask you another thing. Sampling.
Mm-hmm.
Is it technology, is it thievery, or is it a little bit of both?
Well, you've read the poem The Jackdaw of Rheims, where the jackdaw steals everything that he possibly can, and the nest is full of jewels and diamonds and pearls and little girls and all that sort of thing. Well, that's basically what musicians are all about. Inadvertently, there's theft everywhere. It's just never been done technically so evidently as with the computer sampling. It's great fun. It sounds great everywhere. James Brown is everywhere, you know, and he sounds good on all those other records.
When you made the first Zeppelin album, I think you did it in, it was less than a day, what, 17 hours?
No, it's 36 hours.
36 hours. What do you think would have happened if that would have been today and you had all the tools and time and everything else? Do you think it would have changed it at all?
Well, if Led Zeppelin 1 took 36 hours, Now Zen took 9 weeks and 6 days of real hard work. But that's a very quick album. And what happens is when you've got 48 tracks to fool around with, and you've got SSL equipment, and you've got computers chattering, and you've got a guitarist leaning backwards and wishing he had long hair or something, and you've got all these elements there, then spontaneity kind of goes out the window, and you're working on a whole different approach. You're working on the masterpiece. It's fanatical. Thank God there were no drugs involved, because it could have taken months, because you really get into the whole structure and sound and the quality of every single element. Every echo, every reverb is tuned, and it's the kind of the EQ, the graphics on everything are so fine-tuned, it's insane.
Did you almost like it better in the old days?
No, I like it now. I mean, I did that Honey Drippers thing, and I kind of went up my own butt in a way. However, it still took only an afternoon to do, because it was just you know, and you didn't really care whether the hi-hat sounded like tst or like sh. But in the end, you do go up your own backside. I mean, Yes took nearly 2 years to make an album.
In fact, where does Sea of Love fit into the realm of things? I mean,
it doesn't fit anywhere. Sea of Love is, well, you know, I always wanted Housewives in the Midwest. But I kind of thought I'd share the coffee table with Mark Knopfler, not with Tony Bennett. And I'm kind of, it's a funny thing to do. If ever I do find a honey dripper again, I shall eat it. No, I should treat the whole thing with a little less reverence. I should get Setzer to play with me and we'll do some psychobilly stuff. And show the Cramps how it could have been done, perhaps.
Okay. Another thing. What makes Jimmy Page and his guitar sound so unique?
What makes Jimmy Page? I've got no idea.
I mean, so many people try to copy him. No one ever gets that feel.
It's a subtle blend, though, my friend. I don't know, it must be the Grecian 2000. I haven't got a clue what it could be. It's, he's just a real unusual man. Well, I mean, here I am bolstering my career and trying to tell young people that it's all right when you're 39. It's not. He's an unusual guy. But he's great, you know, and I mean, maybe it's just the angle that he leans back at. There's something remarkable about what he does. He does charge circumstances with a great deal of electricity, but he plays wonderfully.
Now, 20 years ago, I think you were quoted as saying that if you actually didn't make it as a star by age 20, you were going to just call it quits and become an accountant or whatever else.
No, I would have sold cars.
Okay, something would have come along in a more different realm of life.
I'd have had to have hustled somehow or another.
Did you ever visualize back then what would happen in these 20 years?
Well, I couldn't visualize what was going to happen because there was no equivalent really then. Frank Sinatra used to get mobbed, so my mom told me. Johnny Ray used to kind of create orgasmic scenes at concerts. But nobody knew that Ozzy Osbourne was going to bite heads off rats and bats and sort of general livestock. So for me to see myself in the middle of all that way back when I first made my first record for CBS, I hope you're listening, CBS, or even watching, you could never even have a clue about what it was going to be like. Because I bought my first record, Presley was in the army, in 1960. Wow. I mean, and I went to see Gene Vincent and wanted to be Gene Vincent when I was about 15. And he was like a top rock star in Britain. He was American, but he didn't really do much over here. He was too good or something. And I saw him play, and he was playing at a place I played at recently after Christmas. I did a charity gig at the same gig near where I used to live. And he played to 300 people, and that was a big gig. And he got $300. And that was a hell of a lot of money. And that was the size, that was the largest event that rock and roll held, a theatre, you know. So nobody knew this was going to happen. I don't even know what has happened. You should see.
Well, let's put it then going to now that you have lived through this, let's go to the future a little more. What do you feel now going forward that you really want to accomplish that you haven't accomplished?
What would I wish to accomplish? I think, having developed this relationship now with Phil Johnston, and actually really enjoying a kind of a re-emergence of my sort of persona everywhere, because I've stopped making excuses about Led Zeppelin, and I do things that I vowed I'd never do, and I do feel very open and free and happy now. I think my ambition now is to stay, coming in from the angle that I do musically and media-wise and stuff like that. I want to pursue this, promote this angle as being a way of handling your career and your music, so that other people can come along and go, well, he doesn't advertise and sponsor beer, or isn't sponsored by beer, and he doesn't do that, and he doesn't do that, so maybe we can still do it this way. We don't have to join, we don't have to be a corporate toy, you know, so much.
In other words, maybe a generation of pure clones as opposed to bastardized clones?
Fancy talking about clones? Well, maybe all I ought to do is just make real good records, and that's what, I mean, I just think I've made the best one since Physical Graffiti. And that was the last good record I made, Physical Graffiti, really. So everything in between has been okay. That's a sweeping statement, but it's what I believe.
Well, I think Presence was pretty good too. Okay.
Had its moments. It was a wheelchair album, Presence.
Wasn't physical though. Physical.
No, I was in a wheelchair all the time. It was tough, that was. You could hear it in the voice. Presence was a real difficult record.
What is your favorite Zepp song?
Hot Dog. No. Well, I always wanted to be. I said, let's get it on the country and western charts, and Atlantic said, if you sent anything to the country and western stations with Led Zeppelin written on it, they'd burn it. Isn't it funny how all the different kind of areas of music, country and western, you know, AOR, CHR, college radio, that everybody is so pompous in each of those areas and so kind of snobbish. My daughter's really kind of a rockabilly freak, you know, and she goes to these remarkable gatherings in London where you get Presley's drummer, DJ Fontana, who played on the Sun Sessions with Sonny Burgess. And I go in there, and everybody's looking at me because, why? He's got long hair. Why? Let's get him. Okay, we'll stab him. No, we don't. We'll do this. And the whole kind of... Now that conservatism is the complete opposite to what the original thing was all about. Like, kick it all out. Get out. Get out. We don't want this and we don't want that. I walk in there, and I know more about rockabilly than they'll ever know. And I deal with CHR, and I know that there's all these different areas where everybody is so kind of... They've got their vision of how they should be. They kind of, this is the way it should be for us. We should be seen like this. And this is how we feel comfortable. And we can't tread beyond that. Or if we do, we'll be cynical about it. Or we'll be, the honesty will disappear a bit. And that's sad. But it's a fact.
Well, after you finally, it's all said and done, you retired to the 8 hours outside of Morocco, wherever it shall be, or I assume you're not going to use some salmon farming like Ian.
I haven't got the beard or the pipe.
But at that point, when a historian comes up and writes a recap of your career, what would you like them to say?
I'd like him to tell me where Linda Winters lives now. I lost her address when she moved out of New York.
Now, who is Linda Winters?
She probably isn't even called Linda Winters anymore. Poor old Linda, what happened to you? She was great, man. Ooh, even the dogs dig it, said Roy Harper. Yeah, you can't be too reverent about this stuff. You know, you can't actually get that sort of, hey, I want to be, thought I was being a socialistic, socialistically minded Democrat, blah, blah. Just look after everybody if you can. That'll do.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.